Well, 7 o'clock has come. I'll call this meeting to order of the West Branch Planning and Zoning Commission. And it's good to see that we have a pretty full commission. And I'm going to start by the roll call. So Brad?
Here.
And we have a new member, Madison.
Here.
And if we could just take a moment, you can tell the rest of the folks here why you're interested in our commission and maybe a bit about your background.
Sure. Yeah, so I moved to West Branch this summer with my boyfriend, and I went to University of Iowa. I studied environmental policy and planning. So all throughout my college career, I've had an interest in working with communities, trying to help the environment in any way I could. Additionally, with my full-time career, I am a planning coordinator for the conservation districts of Iowa. So I work with commissioners all day, every day, all of them mostly out in the Northwest portion. I'm also responsible for developing and implementing 5-year soil and water resource conservation plans with the Soil and Water Conservation District commissioners out there in the Northwest. Kind of funny, I live on the complete opposite side, but I was hired during COVID, so that's why I'm able to work from home, but I do have to travel out here and there. But yeah, I'm really happy to be a part of this. I want to get involved more with the community, so thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, here.
Sally?
Here.
John Fuller? Brian?
Here.
And let's see, James is on Zoom. Okay, wonderful. Well, we have an agenda before us, and I would appreciate approval of the items on the agenda so we can proceed. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. The first item is to discuss an annexation request and also the process we use to look at annexation. I think Adam can tell us a bit about that. Oh, and I always forget the minutes. Excuse me. Okay. I hope we got a chance to see the minutes. And let me know if there are any changes or additions to those minutes from our last meeting in January. There's a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting. Is there a second? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Now we'll go to Adam and annexation questions.
You want the fun pictures first or the boring words?
All the fun pictures, please.
Yeah. So just to give you an idea of the land that is being considered. I zoom out. It goes the opposite way. So the land is this parcel, this one, that one, and then obviously that's Norm Bickford.
We're looking for parcels up there.
What? Okay, well,
Just words. So.
Not sure why I have to share different tabs individually, but we're gonna figure it out and make it work. So, the land is roughly about 60 acres, but it's this area, that area, and then this will eventually be phased in. Obviously, the farm's gonna probably stay till it'll be the last thing that's developed. And interestingly enough, why my mouse is still moving, but there's a little bit owned on the other side of that road that we were kind of working with. I will zoom out a little bit. You're getting a little bit more information than my council members have at the moment, so you should feel a little bit privileged. We've talked a little bit about what to do infrastructure wise. Original plan was sewer generally runs along your creek areas. And the real big issue is we're bringing areas of sewer in the areas outside of the city to get to an area inside the city. So it really screws with how we can even finance this. So a couple things that we discussed is along Peterson. There's some better choke points that can improve our sewer capacity in here. So the idea is, and it can be done at a lot cheaper cost, just because you're doing it all at once and it's not, you're dragging a whole sewer across a golf course and paying for easements and all those things. So that is the original idea to help with sewer, is to have some improvements in here. Versus it being $2 million, it'll be about 300,000 to 500,000 we would share that cost with the developer 50-50. That is considerably different than what City of West Branch has done in the past. A lot of times it's been, you're out of luck. The other difficulty is water pressure out in this area. It's probably at about 40 PSI pretty much. And if you're looking at any type of, anything other than a 2-story house, not gonna have enough water pressure, because it'll probably be in the 30s, mid-30s when you get further and further away from here. So the idea is that new commercial preliminary plat you guys approved, where it's got that cul-de-sac along here where I've got my mouse. Hopefully on a small chunk, we'll put in a water booster station, and we'll have to kind of work along here. Dave and Matt were working on which things should be valved. But there are those two major barriers, and then there are barriers with what to do with the mud road. And so the developer has agreed to improve the mud road and this gravel portion at their own cost. He wants us to get our TIF money back, or our general fund money back as soon as possible. So when we TIF, sometimes it affects our general fund budget. So it's police, fire, library, parks and rec. So there's always a pro and a con with everything you do. And he would rather see us see that investment right away, because he knows some of the struggles that the city is having just in general. There's still a little bit of discussion that needs to happen along here, but we'd obviously want all these roads to be urban. All this is subject to council approval. I don't have any vote. I don't have any say. That's just what's been discussed at the moment. So instead of putting, $7 million of infrastructure before the ground even moves, hopefully it'll go down to about 3 to 5, and a chunk of that, and a higher percentage of that's going to go to the developer than what we've originally discussed. So that's a little bit better in our favor. It will be, once we've got concept maps, it will be mixed. And what I mean by that is we'll talk a little bit more about our comprehensive plan and what we're looking at for the future of West Branch. But with all the infrastructure that's needed, it can't be single family only. It's got to be a mixture of single family, 0 lots, triplexes, and in the back there would be apartments. And there would be everything's going to be front loaded on the water detention, just because there's some area right in here. I'm sure Ryan's pretty well aware of where kind of the water probably runs, but versus KLM, we always have like these small pockets of stormwater issues. The idea would be there's stormwater here, and then like another chunk here, possibly a wet pond and a park somewhere in this area. And then phase 2 through 5 or 3 through 5 would be along here. I've seen just some general preliminary stuff here, but till the developer is ready to kind of come forward and he's confident enough to take questions. I'm just giving you a snapshot, but we want it to be, exactly like our comp plan says, we need park space. We need it to be smart with infrastructure. It pays off, and then it needs to be a neighborhood for everyone, no matter your age bracket. New housing still not going to be affordable to everybody, but hopefully 20 years down the road, as we go through housing, I'm forgetting the term, but essentially as housing gets older, like your rental areas, there's some depreciation, or just in general, incomes can improve as well. But that would be the idea, is hopefully there's a little bit more mixed income. It's just when something's brand new, Ryan can tell you, it's gonna be at a certain price until you go through like a housing cyclical, like generational change. And that's just over time, certain types of housings become more affordable to other people. And I'll describe that a little bit better. I'm a little bit fuzzy on those. I can give some concrete examples on what those look like, but that is like the fun picture. That is the fun idea. The reason why I'm also bringing up future land use map is we really don't have an area for it. We have a small part that's residential, and then the rest is not there. So big picture short, if there's gonna be a mix, it's gonna be semi-dense. We're looking at realistically 5,000 people by 2040. It could go faster, but I think 17 years, that's probably what we're looking at between all those homes. You're talking, you'll have a couple families in there. So just kind of keep in mind that city staff needs to plan through that the next 17 years, but we also need to kind of plan it through comprehensive plan wise, and then just future land use map, current zoning. So that is the fun. We'll kind of piece that a little bit together as we get closer to these things. Questions while I've got this map up?
Has there been any thought of a PUD in the area?
Yes, that will be essentially what the developer will ask for. We did require single family be next to single family. I've run into this too many times. When I was on Marion Planning and Zoning Commission, where you will just get slack from the current homeowners if it's not single family. So politically, I think we got to do single family there. But you will hear, I'm just forewarning you, you guys will hear, I don't want to see that in my backyard. That is what I went through in Marion. That is just not the way West Branch is. It has never been a community for just people with certain types of incomes. And so, or a certain type of lifestyle. So I'm just telling you to be a little bit prepared on that. You may even hear worse things than that. I certainly did when I had my time in Marion.
Does a PUD naturally follow that's a little more dense than?
Roger,
zero-
yes.
Zero lot lines and single family.
You'd think that there would be the opportunity for more dense apartment buildings.
I'm not terribly opposed to it.
The
I'm just
partial
asking you that.
The partial reason for planned unit development is one for density, because of how much infrastructure it's gonna take. You have to have X amount of housing units for it to be profitable. Number one. Number two, we're talking about, implementing things that we want to see in our comprehensive plan. We want things to be more walkable, more bikeable, more intergenerational between age groups. One technique to bring neighbors together is roads that are not as wide. So they probably will be asking for private roads, just like Chad Cooney did on Elm Street. There would still be your service collector roads. But you would have private areas. You have private roads where the streets aren't quite as wide. So what that does is it creates a more walkable environment, and it creates it's just visually easier to interact with your neighbor and share spaces with them. If I had the pictures, you know, I could show you that stuff. But I'm hoping the developer will, when he's ready, he'll kind of come forward with that thought.
Another aspect is that certainly with city growth, we don't have the kind of parkland that would be required for a city of 5,000. And in particular, we don't have that much parkland on the far west side. So one would think that with a PUD, we have a chance to try and expand our numbers of parkland acres.
Council's probably thinking we have a lot of parkland right now, but with this development like this.
And the other
it has to have
developments.
some- has to- And trails leading to it.
The other gap here too, now that we're kind of talking about that, there's Magellan's line here and it's high pressure. So you can't build around here. So there's some gaps here, and that's why it can't be, there are so many barriers. That's why it has to be mixed use in some way, shape, or form, or mixed type of residential, because single family only, when you've got 10% go to green space, you've got to have a water station, booster station, you gotta have sewer improvements, then you gotta take a mud road and turn it into an urbanized road. And then you've got 10%, another 10% gone through, you can't build around this pipe. And then you're talking possibly another mud road along here that needs to be improved, and gravel along here. If it's if it's like the Meadows, it will not be financially solvent on that side, not without the city saying we're gonna pay 100% for the infrastructure, and there's no way my council's gonna say that. So,
What are the thoughts about interior circulation? So that we don't have all the frontage on Johnson Cedar Road having direct access.
There would be two.
yeah. This
There would
may
have-
be easier.
There would have to be a couple accesses to Cedar Johnson.
Yes,
Yes, yes.
Maybe
but-
two,
probably here,
yeah,
here, but
that's not all we need.
then a big collector here. And then you'd have your private streets. This would be public, private here, private here. Again, and obviously, that kind of gets in the way of that. But again, that's very early concept stuff. But yes, we want connections. We don't really want cul-de-sacs, but we also want to limit, to your point, we don't want too much entry on Cedar Johnson either.
I think that's a good thing to keep in mind, because that's going to be eventually a much more, not an arterial necessarily, but certainly a secondary arterial.
Correct, correct.
Questions by other people here, please. Right.
Yeah, I just wondered, on this, annexation and the street improvements, I guess. It sounds like you've already talked to him about the Cedar Johnson dirt road section being improved to some type of urban section for the connection. What, would the limits of that be where Cedar Johnson Road currently changes from like chip seal to dirt? And what's that,
So we may not be talking the exact point.
well, where I'm going with it is, what is this much development gonna do to the schedule for the Cedar Johnson Road? Because it's gonna put a lot of traffic on something that we already have needs.
I imagine council will change with all this information, but 2026, which is probably when the dirt will be moving in reality over there. 26 is we have some expiring debt, and so we would roll over that debt into a new project, which it was like 3-2 to do Main Street, but with this going on, I imagine it'll swing towards Cedar Johnson getting done first.
We'll have to decide whether to do Cedar Johnson. Approve Cedar Johnson for a mile. Well, 3/4 of a mile or Main Street. The last time the council chatted was Main Street,
Correct.
even though I thought we would.
And it was
Focus
kind of
on Cedar
split,
Johnson.
so I could see one. All it takes is one to just, and then it's 3-2 the other way.
Guess the reason I ask is, I mean, the traffic burden is gonna be significantly increased by this development, so while we're having the discussions about the projects should participate in, I think it warrants discussion that the street improvements that may naturally come along with some of the utilities that happen in there anyway could be participated in by this development. I'm not sure if they want to hear that because they're, trying to make their money work, but you can't just put 500 houses out in a cornfield and then not expect there to be, 500 cars that need to come
Right.
on that street
So
every
the
day.
current chip and seal stops right here at this driveway.
And around the corner, right across the front of Bickford, it's chip seal also.
Right here, it stops right here.
And so it seems like if they urbanize beyond that with, asphalt or concrete or whatever, we're gonna have a better street where they're at, but then still a deteriorating and probably more quickly deteriorating existing streets.
I think we would demand that as part of the improvement of this, we would do this. Sure. From here south would be part of the improvement.
Correct. And
That might be on us, I don't know.
correct, those two sections,
North and north would be all on hill to develop it.
correct,
50-50 split.
correct, correct. Well, he makes it sound like he wants to pay for it all.
Yeah.
so.
Even better.
We would obviously pay for the city's stuff that's already there, so that would be your Bickford and what Roger was pointing to on Cedar Johnson.
I don't quite understand the sewer. How does this? How do you sewer this? It naturally wants to follow the creek. How does that
Are they
connect
gonna
down to
do,
there?
are they gonna do a lift station when the current issue is something that Peterson Street area?
I don't want to speak on behalf of Dave. But I think there are some natural flows along this way, and that's why I asked him that too when I talked to him today. That I don't want to just do it this way because it's whatever, the cheap way or the fastest way, because it bites us in the butt every time we do it the cheap way. And so I made that clear to Dave. That if we do it that way, it can't be done the cheap way. So I can't answer it out any more than that, Ryan. That's something Dave's. I tried to retain as much as I could, in those meetings.
Looking at the annexation
Protocol,
protocol.
yes.
Is there anything in here that we need to? That isn't gonna work with what they're proposing, like they need us to. Consider something here, or we're just looking at it because it's gonna come up whenever this happens.
Just looking at it, it's gonna come up. I guess the best way to explain it, it's no different than any other public hearing you guys go through. There will be a packet, an application. The couple things that are different is we will have to consult with Johnson County Board of Supervisors. Right now, the state code favors cities. They technically really can't say no. They can just say yes, or when we have a consultation meeting, we can work together. But as of right now, that advantage is to the cities. So there's just a little bit longer requirement for the public hearing rather than 2 weeks, it's 3 weeks. But just kind of letting you know, when it comes to West Branch right now, annexation is not too complicated. But let's say we get super explosive growth and we're closer to Iowa City, then there's a lot of state boards we have to go through when you're closer to city boundaries. So if you ever hear what goes on in Tiffin and Iowa City and Coralville and North Liberty, it takes forever for them to annex because all those cities fight over land. So
At least we don't have any contiguous cities.
Yeah.
Can you think of any reason why Johnson County might oppose this? I would imagine they'd see it as a desirable change.
Only reason might be that it doesn't follow their rural land use development.
Mhm.
But if it became West Branch, they're be out of it.
I never know why a county would say no outside of, yeah, that reason. Is there a certain plan they had? Normally it's cities that fight each other over.
Sure. Brian,
I do have another question on the roadway improvements again on the east-west dirt road on the north side of the property that you're describing.
Yeah.
There be access from this development to that in the. in what they're proposing?
Yes. Whether. So going east. Where I guess the collector street would go and then to the east would get improved and then down south to Cedar Johnson. Probably going west will be when the next phase or phases come.
I guess
Does that
what-
make sense what I'm saying here? Okay.
Yeah, on the street improvements, it sounded like they thought that might be a gravel street there. They're gonna convert the dirt to gravel instead of a urbanized section or
No, it'll be urbanized.
so some sort of hard surface.
Yeah, and it'll be done to whatever standard Dave feels. If he feels it's a secondary arterial, I'll let him speak on behalf of that.
But all that becomes city maintenance then too. We have to maintain out. Well,
Couple miles.
then
Mile.
I wondered too if the road that runs east of there, it's certainly not within our city limits or anywhere near something that we are touching, but it might be getting a significant bump in traffic. If anyone that moves to this area is leaving town north, I don't think I'd want to drive 2 miles south to get to the main arterial there and just take that road. So we might, I don't know if there's been any discussion or like an agreement thought about with the county to do something with the 280th, whatever. I think it switches to
It's 280th and
280th.
340th,
Cedar County.
same street.
We will certainly try. There's a difference between big difference between planning that I learned in school and being an administrator. Johnson County will probably say, well, they're gonna annex this way anyway, so that's just not do anything. Same reason why Cedar Johnson Road. Why would Cedar County invest in that road? Why would Johnson County invest in that road when they know we're gonna go that way eventually? We can certainly try, but that's generally what we get as a response.
Cedar County, I don't know what the percent would be.
Well, Johnson
All the
County,
tax
it'd be
dollars
the
go to
same thing.
Johnson County.
It'd be the same thing. You know, they're gonna say, well, why should we improve it when we know they're gonna annex it? It's the same. It's. You know,
Is there any standard for vehicle counts to set precedent that they have to improve the quality of the road? Like a traffic study says there's 100 more cars a day on this road and now they need to bring it to a
you
better-
can have a traffic study
After this. was
that
done.
encourages it, but there's no traffic study that's gonna say you have to spend the money, because let's say Johnson County had some emergencies and they didn't have the money, or if it's not in their 5-year plan, you know, they don't have to speed it up if they don't want to.
It'd be a street from Cedar Valley isn't even improved, which is highly traveled. Can't imagine. They would improve the gravel road. Or West Point.
Maybe we'll have growth in that direction and it won't be an issue, but it seems like.
Sunbury Road, another one. You think they would, it takes you to Sunbury,
Right,
Rochester,
all that,
like,
highly traveled road. Farm to market road.
Okay, any more questions? Let's then move to item B, 4B, about the zoning and future land use maps. We have a future land use map for 2032, which I think was produced in 2013. And isn't exactly up to date, I think, on current land use, but at least is indicative. So, Adam, what do you want to have us talk about with regard to the land use map?
So I know probably Ryan and John know this. I don't know where, and if I'm talking over you, let me know. But I just want to kind of explain the two differences, because a lot of times when I either talk to someone from the public, they don't always necessarily understand why there's two maps and what they mean. And so this current one I'm showing right now is our current zoning map. So this is essentially our law. So if you are a property here and something happens to your property, you gotta stay whatever that zone is. If it's in, say, a floodplain, then that's where it gets trickier. What makes it different is what we call a future land use map, which isn't necessarily a law. It is a picture of what we want the future of West Branch to look like. So, say in this area, you buy this land, oh, it's gonna be residential. It tells the developer it's gonna be residential. You buy something over here, it's gonna be commercial. If something happens in here, it's going to depend on, it's not a law. So let's say, for an example, West Branch roofing, it's not in a flood, let's say it's not in a floodplain. It is, but for an example, it's an industrial area right next to some neighborhoods. Right now, it's currently zoned industrial. So if something were to happen to that building or somebody buys it and they want to redevelop it, they have to ask for a rezoning. And generally, our zoning future land use map should tell us what we want that future zoning to be. You don't necessarily, where it becomes dicier is, do we really want industrial there 50 years from now? And so there's nothing I can do until we adopt that zone in that spot and update our zoning map. So those are kind of some of the things that we need to think about when we're talking about a town of 5,000. It doesn't always just mean it's about the stuff on the outskirts of town. Because if we're talking about reusing old space, if we're talking about how do we make our downtown still attractive when there's this awesome, nice Quick Star, you know, hypothetically on the corner, how do we still maintain our small historic community feel? And those are things I just think we should all be aware is it's not just the stuff on the outside. We also need to think about what our community looks like in our core and what is the intention of our core part of our community. Because right now, there's nothing I can do in terms of how do we want to change some of our infill development. I've got nothing tied. So I'm not saying we need to rezone absolutely everything, but it's something we need to start thinking about. And it's something that we need to start discussing, just in general as a whole, as you guys are driving around. You know, does this fit? Will this fit in a community of 5,000? So obviously those things are a little bit more controversial, but it is part of change as well. There's a reason why industrial is not in the middle of residential. There's just. So that's kind of my point. The difference between the two maps is future land use map is just a picture of what we want the future of West Branch to look like. Our zoning map is the law. It is what gives me my authority to say, hey, you need to build this way, or you need to build that way, and Terry's gonna double check that you do it that way, you know? So I just kind of wanted to go over those two maps, and kind of get you an understanding why I'll probably be pushing for future land use map. As we kind of talk things going forward.
Can I ask a clarifying question for my understanding? So, what I'm gathering is you're saying that in the future, us as a board will have to discuss what we want to rezone, and then based off that, from the future land use map, it will become changed in the zoning map, which is what you utilize
Correct.
to, okay, all right, just wanted to clarify.
So we have
for myself.
areas in town that zone. in
Industrial,
contradiction
yep.
to
Okay,
future.
okay,
I guess.
Well, another way to put it is that this future land use map is our vision of the future. And if our vision of the future is different from the current zoning map, then there's a trigger to change the current zoning map. We go from vision to
30
the,
years ago.
essentially the statute.
And we knew all that was, we knew this map had some inconsistencies inside it. But it helps protect us. Say if someone wants to buy that strip of land and put a house there, we can say, no, you can't put a house there. And if it goes to court, we
Correct.
got the.
Correct.
Well, we can
Probably
say that
right.
we don't want to have a house there, but we probably have zoning that permits a house there. So we would not have much to stand
We
on.
don't have to allow a house.
Only if it needs rezoned.
No, we wouldn't use it, because our land use map says it's industrial. We want it to
If
be
our
industrial.
zoning map says it's industrial. Like the location.
Zoning, okay, you're right. the zoning map probably.
If our zoning map
That's HCI
shows
district
it, our
zoning map.
current zoning map shows it as residential. But our future zoning, which is not long, which is not the Bible, let's say. It says it's gonna be industrial in the future. If it's still zoned residential, they put residential.
You're right.
Only if they have to rezone it can be dictate what they rezone it to.
Yeah.
Correct.
Which in a way is why it's so important to look at this future land use map and see if there are those kinds of inconsistencies. Also to see whether this future map is one that really fits our vision of the future. And then make changes to the zoning map.
So are we suggesting right now that we don't like this future map?
No, not necessarily. And in fact, how do you get to that point of saying this is or is not consistent with our views? That really takes us to the next step on the agenda, which is the comprehensive plan and its objectives. If the future land use map is not consistent with the comprehensive plan for the future, then there's a reason to relook the future land use map and make changes to it.
I'm essentially working backwards, but there's. So on this, I'm working backwards because I'm trying to show you the end picture. This is what we want the city looks like. This is the tool that makes it a law. This is the tool that makes. And then it's the top plan is the tool on how we make this plan. So I'm working backwards. Typically, we start with the words first, not necessarily the picture. But to John Fuller's point, that's why we're talking about the comp plan too, because our future land use map should be consistent with that plan. anytime there's a court case, usually comes down to the comp plan and is it consistent with our vision and in our zone?
Sally,
I haven't looked in a while, but it's the only part of the city which is historical. Historical zoning, is that only the business district on Main Street? And no other part of the town where we have actually quite a bit of historical housing?
that is the case. And what that suggests, if we have other areas of town that we think have historic significance, that we should have a historic preservation plan that points those out. And then we should use that plan to make changes in our land use.
Do we have, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Do we have a historical preservation commission that's active nowadays?
Yes, and it's got an active, it's not as active as I suspect it should be, but we do have an historic preservation plan.
The only person slowing down the board is just me juggling everything that's going on. But we do have some volunteers helping with one of our goals, and that's to be a certified local government. That means we just get more grants and things like that. We did add Travelers Rest on that map too. So that is a preserved house on the edge of town that used to be on the Underground Railroad. So that's preserved.
Mhm.
But the next step of preserving certain neighborhoods, that's gonna be quite a task. And it really just depends on what direction the Historic Preservation Commission wants to go, because my time's limited, their time's limited. That may or may not be their priority one. If I were to guess, it's the historic nomination, so.
So,
Addison,
so then I would not assume, but I would wonder, would we as a board need to talk with the Historic Preservation Board to figure out what they find important as we move forward with this future land?
I would say so, once they are ready to have that
Okay,
kind of a meeting.
Got it.
What about a joint brainstorming meeting between the P and Z and historic press? Just to
Reasonable enough.
sort of see where they are, nothing, and no official action would be taken, but just start communicating and find out what's
I
happening.
think that would be a really good tool, and I could help facilitate that if needed.
Yes, right.
I think we may contribute to this discussion. That I have something else I want to mention too. I believe the comprehensive plan update included some recommendations to as far as the Historic Preservation Commission, considering including neighborhoods of town for funding resources for those properties to be improved. You remember that's the case?
I don't think that was one of the objectives, but it might be. We have to go back to that plan. and
Maybe
read
it
the
was just something
objectives.
that we talked about. I guess where I was going with that is I assume they should start with any guidance you've given them in the comprehensive plan. And then if there's something that's not there that we all agree should happen, then we're moving towards that.
Well, that's where maybe a joint meeting would work out nicely, because we could say, here's what we're interested in terms of changes in the population of the town and activities in town. And here are some ideas. They may not be complete ideas, but ideas about the land use patterns.
On those maps,
And,
I meant to mention, I guess for some of the members that maybe haven't been here when these things have been changed, or when there's, controversial rezonings, I guess our opinion, like it looks like a lot of spot zoning when you look at the future land use map as it is right now, but most of that is basically meeting what's already there and not necessarily demanding anything needs to change unless there's a lack of activity. If there's an active business on that site, then they're not showing it as something that has changed to create that controversy. But if there was that building, say, for example, was demolished and there's no building rebuilt, then at that time we say, well, if this were to ever be rebuilt, we might revisit what it it's rebuilt as. And that seems to be the path of least resistance. You don't get angry property owners. We also do have, I just want to mention, I guess, on the zoning map. This was last updated before we had the PUD zoning even exist.
Correct, that's right.
And I think there's quite a few things that have changed since the zoning map was, you know, whatever version this is, I guess we'll review this. So I'm sure it's worth.
Let's do a year on that for the current zoning map.
19, yeah. I was actually surprised to see the Cedars Edge subdivisions on here, but the PUDs are not. Maybe this one is, it's just not. It's a
What's
big
the
red
red?
highlighted section. Well, it's RB2, or I'm sorry, R2 and RB1 and other places on the map, but it doesn't say there. Oh, I see, there's a note that calls it out as PUD, but not.
I'll
It's the-
chime in on two comments Ryan made, and this is my point in being friends with your elected officials. The state changed their housing rehab program to a point where the city of West Branch will not have enough set aside dollars. It's for like big swaths of area that need to be connected. It used to be, you know, it would just be house by house. Or a town could do 5 or 6. Now they want 5 or 6 in a specific neighborhood, which they may not all qualify for the income. And then they want it even more than 5 and 6. It's more or less, it's like 20 to 30 homes they want to improve. There's no way we're gonna find that and have the 10% down to do it. I'm always working with ECIA. There could be some options. But it all comes down to, do you fit in that income guideline, and are they willing to work with ECIA? That's kind of where nuisances come into play too. There are people that probably just sit on a house or two in town that could just be improved. That's one thing I'll be working on this spring, is your broken windows or you're missing siding, those types of things. But it gets tricky because sometimes there's people that don't have the money too, that I'm working with. So that's one. And then 2, we're talking. What were you talking, Ryan? Now that I lost my thought.
So about the future land use,
Okay.
leave it kind of spot zoned for buildings that exist, but change it when there's nothing on the land in case it gets bought by plan to develop it. And then the existing zoning map need an update.
Again, this goes down to being friends with your elected officials. I know I was gonna talk a little bit budget, but might as well do it now. Obviously, inflation is affecting everyone, including ourselves as just an entity as well. But there are a number of property tax reforms that the state is probably gonna pass. They've already passed exemptions. And I'll give you the scale. We've got what, 6, 7 departments. We have police, fire, parks and rec, library, a little bit of city hall, a little bit on, you know, your commission that gets paid through general fund property taxes. That's really what the state is going after. And we've only seen an increase last year of roughly 32,000 in general fund dollars and 52,000 general fund dollars. So every little penny, even, it may seem ridiculous, but even me telling Dave to do this math for 2,000, if it's in the budget, I'm scraping hard. Like, I've done everything I can to not like completely gut a department or not lay somebody off. And now there's more exemptions coming through. We're talking not necessarily huge gain in dollars. And so that's why it's probably hasn't been done. Things are only gonna get done until they have to get done. And right now, we've got a big map in our office and we just write in the changes. And until we're ready to spend that 2,000, we just aren't gonna do it. That's unfortunate that we're in that situation. But that's what we're faced with.
When I was in the planning program, on occasion, I could figure out a way to get student help to do certain tasks. And given that most planning students have pretty good GIS skills, maybe it would be possible to pursue updating the current zoning map using student help. Or maybe it would be possible to have the Cedar County GIS person.
We
do that sort
don't
of-
have a GIS coordinator anymore,
Oh,
county.
oh gosh. Okay.
That's too bad.
The ECI cloud.
Yeah, it's shared, so they do the minor updates, but they won't, yeah.
One could argue that adding the PUDs is a pretty minor update.
So that's just me giving you, and this is my same thing with, I've got no issues boards meeting. But as we grow and we aren't getting enough revenue necessarily to capture all of our expenses, it's harder on me and it's harder on Leslie, and that's why a good reason why Leslie's not here. That's one of the way we cut down. She's not getting paid overtime. That's why I'm here. That's why we're having Jim do notes, because I'm literally scraping for every dollar that I can. And so as I lose my thought, I guess when I'm talking about what's going on, new homeowners or new people in general in your town take up a lot of time because they don't know the rules. They don't know who to call for help. You guys know where this neighborhood is and that neighborhood is. They don't necessarily know why Cedar Johnson is the street is the way it is. Like, I've had a lot of conversations with that, or Dawson, when a home is new and the neighborhood isn't developed yet, everybody wants speed bumps, but once it's filled in. So I spent a lot of time, and so does Leslie, massaging those questions and issues, or they come from out of state and they don't understand that the city doesn't do assessments, or they don't understand that we don't do our own trash, or they don't understand why we don't have sewer and water meters. There's a lot of time in the growth too that isn't always seen. But so I've had no issues with you guys meeting. In terms of getting something going, I can't make you any promises how fast it's gonna be. That's just where we're sitting, and it's gonna be based on some volunteer assistance. So Madison's certainly willing to help out. I'm gonna take it. But I'm just letting you know, there's a lot of pressure when you're growing in a community.
Okay, well, does that take us then, or if there aren't more questions, to look at the comprehensive plan objectives? And I'm pleased to see that we have that set of objectives before us. The comprehensive plan, I was taking another look at it before I got together. Has something like, what is it, 13 chapters, 12 chapters, really up to 12 chapters. Each chapter has a set of goals, and then to further develop those goals, there are objectives under each one. So, for example, here we have the vision statement, and it has some goals. Actually, vision statement, chapter 3, defines the goals and the objectives. But for chapter 4 and chapter 5, the 6 and so forth, there are a set of goals that we think are part of the vision for the future. And so under land use goals, one of the ones that pertains to our discussion tonight is goal number 2, strive to maximize infill development. Also relevant is the goal number 3, conserve the historic nature of West Branch. So all of these are goals. And as I say, under each goal, you'll find that there are various objectives. I suppose I could turn to one of the goals. And let's see, what would be the best chapter? Maybe the chapter on environmental stewardship, because Madison might resonate with some of these. I'll turn to page 19 in the plan. And page 19, we have as some of the objectives to achieve the goals. One that is to publicize the flood insurance program, so residents become more aware and can participate if they choose. Another is to partner with organizations like Trees Forever, Reliant Energy, and look for opportunities for branching out grants to increase the number and variety of trees in West Branch. Another is designated as a Tree City USA. Another is to track green energy programs and support and publicize renewable energy programs, such as Solarize Johnson County. Another is to be attentive to the virtues of dark skies and take advantage of newer lighting technologies. Another is to investigate compost and recycling services. There's also one in here that has to do with the idea of topsoil and whether we should have topsoil requirements in terms of replacing topsoil in areas that are developed. Now, interestingly, just this afternoon, I got an email from the Public Works Service Bureau about Senate File 455, which essentially, if passed, would say that cities cannot control developers' activities in terms of replacing topsoil. So as Adam was saying, many things are in flux, and the state seems bound and determined to remove a variety of city opportunities. Another is on stormwater, and it changes the stormwater requirements and makes them makes cities less able to deal with stormwater. So there are changes, and those changes would impact the kind of comprehensive plan and the various objectives within that comprehensive plan. But I think that one of the things that we might do, I've been thinking about this topic of discussing the comprehensive plan, might be to take a chapter at a time and look at the objectives in that comprehensive plan to see if there are any that we might want to try and revise, might want to try and highlight, and might want to work at putting those objectives, one or two at a time, before the city council. I don't know what you folks think about that, but this plan was done in 2019. We're a few years beyond that. There may well be reasons to change it short of any kind of a full change of the comp plan. But there might be additions, omissions perhaps, or at least try to pursue some of the objectives in that comprehensive plan. Discussion? Yes.
Yeah, John, I think that would be a really good, not start, because I know you guys have already been doing great things, but I definitely think going chapter by chapter would be a good idea and revisiting some of the objectives. And I know with like the recent development and the growth of West Branch, some things from 2019 versus today might need to be altered or revised. But I think as a group, you know, conversing about that would be a really good start.
Adam?
Anything that we can do to just kind of reinforce why we do things is good in terms of how we do that. I'll kind of leave that a little bit maybe on your plate, John, that we maybe work together and figure out how to do that. But, you know, this development's game changer and it could lead to even more growth. It's a different ball game when you're on a planning and zoning commission where you're approving 2 subdivisions a month. So, I'm not saying we're gonna get that fast, but it is you get more questions as you have more people in your community. Sometimes you lose focus on the purposes for those reasons.
Sally,
Oh, this is just a question. I'm on the city webpage. And I was trying to find if the comprehensive plan.
it is on the webpage. Oh,
Okay, maybe I'll-
don't ask me to find it.
No, I was just searching for, so there is it, okay,
Planning and zoning page.
it's on P and Z. Okay.
That's cool.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm allowed to just like shout out things. Like,
Just raise your hand.
Okay, and all right. So I was gonna say that, I mean, I know I'm new here, but with my experience working with the Soil and Water Conservation District Commissioners, one of the biggest things that I've been trying to encourage them to do is increase their outreach to the community. Because I mean, I hear that Adam's being tackled with a bunch of questions from people who aren't in the know. So maybe we could take on as a board, helping answer some of those questions, whether that be through certain means of outreach, attending some of the community events or things like that. And then also partnerships. I really love partnerships. And I think they can really provide a lot of opportunities for not necessarily funding, because I don't know where that would come from, but they just open a lot of opportunities and avenues. And I think with the growing community, utilizing communications with the partnerships that we have around us would be a real good thing to look at.
The library has an occasional column in the newspaper.
Okay,
Perhaps PNC could have an occasional column in the newspaper about things going on in this branch.
yeah, and I know the website for the city is really awesome. Do you guys work on that? Is that who develops it? Yeah, it's really awesome. Yeah, really good. And I think, you know, with the younger generation, that's because, you know, living right near the high school, there's a lot of young kids and me as well, I guess. But I think utilizing social media, maybe like Facebook or something, would be a really good way to provide some informational outreach other than just the newspapers. But yeah, it's just some of my thoughts.
Well, let's take that up as a topic in our next meeting and see if we can carry it through and start doing something on this. I think that's an excellent point. In terms of what we might want to look at first, I would suggest perhaps chapter 5 on land use. That's the topic I'm paying attention to. Also, it's the slimmest topic in the entire comprehensive plan. It has a few goals and a few objectives, and I think that it could certainly be beefed up in a variety of ways. So it's worth starting with. And then I'd suggest following in order and picking up next on chapter 6 in housing, which is a much more substantial chapter and will require a little bit more attention on our parts before we get in here to discuss the matter. Okay, what else on the comp plan? You see the list of objectives, well, actually, the list of goals in the handout that was provided. We were just looking at those goals even in advance of taking up a chapter at the time, because those goals are really interwoven. There are interrelationships between goals in one chapter and goals in another chapter. So would that be, I mean, we've already been given some homework for next time in terms of envisioning the 5,000 population city. But I think homework in terms of looking at the land use chapter 5 and getting a start maybe on in chapter 6 on housing would be good for next time. Okay, questions? Didn't know you'd have homework, did you, Mavis?
Actually, yeah, I think I saw it on the agenda. Or I saw it somewhere, it said homework. I was like, oh,
Really?
thought I was over this, but.
Okay, we took up the front setback question last time. And Terry, have you given us a revision of that, or was there any reason to revise it?
Well, I thought from reading that all we did was table it. And
Right,
everybody was gonna take a look at it. And we were gonna bring it up at the next meeting, we could do this one.
right.
I know there's some issues with the zero lot line lots because of their narrow width. So the percentage is gonna have to be a lot higher to even get a driveway in there. A non-pervious surface. The typical 80-foot wide lot, you could have, at 50%, you could have 40 foot of paving in your front yard. These garages are 24 by 24. You could have a 24-foot wide driveway. Setback. You know what their setback is, so. I guess Matt was supposed to get a hold of me to go out and take a look at some of these, and I don't know if he did or not. Not this Matt.
Yes.
Matt Goodale, and I did not hear from him.
Sorry, Public Works Director.
Yeah. So I would say, I might just need to reach out to Matt.
What information are you looking for?
We're trying to avoid making something that's more constricting than what already exists, like we don't want to put some people that are.
We don't want to create a lot of nonconformities. And we want to make it feasible to go ahead and put in a 20-foot or a 20 or a 24-foot wide driveway. Is what we're after. Because that ties into the second amendment that I proposed about requiring them to be paved. Instead, they're not even required to be paved. We don't want new houses with gravel drives. Okay, so if we're gonna require them to be paved, we don't want their whole front yard paved. You're creating a concrete jungle, is what you're creating the runoff, and so forth. But if we don't require them to pave it, then we got the other issue where we got gravel washing down in their storm sewers. You're creating liabilities with gravel on the road, So I think, in my opinion, the best thing to do is go ahead and require drives, aisles, and parking spaces all to be hard surface. And limit how much hard surface you can put in your front yard.
Well, it seemed to me that if you didn't get together with Matt, that we could put this off until our meeting next month and give you a chance to do that sort of thing.
The first one.
Yes, the first one.
The percentage of paving in your front yard.
Right. The second one, we could.
Yeah,
start
I
discussing.
think, we're coming into the construction season. It'd be nice to, because it might take 3 readings at council for a change, you don't know. But it would be nice to go ahead and require all parking spaces, drives, aisles to be permanent dust-free surface.
Okay, well, let's table the one on front setback coverage and move to the parking requirement to have paving. That does include, as it says, manufactured paving materials. So we could have permeable pavers as part of that.
And that, the permanent pavers is only allowed on private property. You can't do a sidewalk, that's city owned. You can't do the approach. That's between the sidewalk and the curb.
Yeah.
They
Well-
have to be, I think, according to SUDAS, I think that is required to be concrete. So they could do a driveway from the sidewalk to the garage if they wanted. In pavers, that's fine. They could do it in asphalt if they want.
Well, this particular proposed ordinance says for all parking and stacking spaces, drives and aisles. Doesn't say anything about beyond that. Right? So it covers the area that we're interested in.
Just the, yeah, it does not cover the sidewalk or the approach.
Now, I'd suggested that the words newly constructed be added to that last sentence. So it reads all newly constructed and stacking spaces, parking and stacking spaces. Did that get done?
We never touched these at all. Because
Okay.
they have actually both of them.
Okay.
I wouldn't have a problem with that. I think that would be good. But just one thing to think here is if someone puts in a new one, like you said, Mr. Perkins, hey, it doesn't, if someone wanted to put a parking space in their front yard. Right now, you know, they could do gravel, but if we go ahead and adopt this, it could be paving, it could be asphalt, it could be brick. If we would adopt this,
Right.
okay, I just want to make sure we're all good on that.
Any questions?
If someone was gonna go ahead and has a gravel parking lot there right now,
We are not
Okay.
forcing them to change it.
no, they can maintain it.
So say
But
like,
if they expand it, then they need to go ahead and bring it up to code.
so this house right back here is a perfect example. Say they want to put a garage on the side lot back there. You're gonna make them pave it all the way to the,
The code says.
or Larry Rummel or somebody like that. They have to. and it's
Or you
only
could, or
theirs.
you could have this one up here across from the water tower that's got driving all over their front yard. That is full of gravel and there's gravel out in the street every time it rains. So, I mean, it's the same thing. It's just one's a little more extreme than the other one. They could go, if they had a gravel driveway right there or
Well,
there
that-
right now,
If that's the case, why don't we make it for everything? Everything has to.
because you can't retroact. It'll take care of itself over time as someone decides to expand it or, you know, something like that. I mean, it's considered non-conforming. So once you go ahead and change the non-conformity, you gotta bring it up to code. You know, it almost sort of ties back in with what Ron was saying about these. It looks like flat zoning on here. Well, now is the time to go ahead and figure out what we want the zoning to be and maybe change it. So if something would happen where it burned down to a certain percentage or something happened, then you'd say, nope, you gotta go ahead and put this in there because that's not allowed in that zone anymore. So it's sort of the same thing here. I mean, so.
And as a practical matter, I think it'd be awfully hard to go around and tell people, well, you've had a gravel driveway there for 20 years or 40 years or something. Now you gotta leave it over. But for all new things taking place, you really want to make sure that they're properly done. Sally?
Just out of curiosity, do we have a code section that governs how much parking people can engage in their front yards?
No, not right now.
So anybody you could have basically the equivalent of a parking lot in your front yard.
Huge issue in my last community, just because it was rural and people like to work on their cars, or they were next to Clear Lake, so then there's a bunch of RVs or boats and, you know, there's nothing. So you can park whenever you want in your front yard. So unless you live in a, like Dawson and you have a covenant, but it's up to the neighbors to enforce it, not necessarily the city.
Right?
I was just gonna say, kind of what Adam was saying is that at our last meeting, when we were discussing these, it was brought up that the reason we haven't really seen a lot of issues with new construction not being built to these standards is because it's in the covenants of the subdivisions, but I think it's probably best practice to have something on our own code that we can go back to, so that if we get a developer hypothetically in one of these new subdivisions that decides they don't want to use they're gonna put gravel drives in, just leave them in, we can say, no, here it is in code that says you have to pave it, or you want to do full frontage of the house in concrete, we can say, no, here it is, it says R2 needs 60% or less, and R1 needs 50, R3 needs 75, or whatever
That makes some sense.
things are.
Okay, more discussion? Hearing none, I think that I would make the proposal that the motion that we adopt the wording that Terry has provided for us with the words new construction added after the all in the last sentence.
John, could we change one other word
What's that?
where it says must be it must be a permanent dust free surface? I think a better word there would be shall instead of must.
Oh, okay, this is where we need a lawyer to tell us.
Now, I do a lot of this stuff and you got to read the words.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Because people interpret them different ways and shall is always will. It's required, where must is
Yeah,
should be.
well, it depends on the judge too.
Yeah.
My mother told me you must go to bed.
You could change it and use the word required. Which would make it, what if you just use the word required?
Well, I
Instead
think,
of shall or must,
I think shall will be a fine addition.
make it more.
Do I have a second to my motion?
I need to find out where we are. I mean, are we on page 8 of the packet? Am I missing?
We are right here.
I know, but I'm trying to find it. I understand where we are on the,
Oh, I,
on the agenda.
13.
30.
John, I'll second your
Yes.
motion to the amended
Okay,
sentence for the parking.
okay.
payment requirement.
Do we have a second to motion? Call for the question, and I suppose that I should have a voice vote on this. So let's start with Brad.
Yeah.
Edison,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Sally,
yes,
yes. Ryan,
Yes.
Jim? You're not here now. Okay, the motion passes. Now, Terry, we should discuss the other motion about the code front setback requirement. This really does go hand in hand with the parking one, so it'd be best if we can pass these on to the council as a package. So you've been thinking about other possibilities?
Yeah, I mean. We went ahead and we last year, 2 years ago, defined with zero lot lines. We defined the minimum lot widths and lot areas and so forth. Okay. Which, depending on the zone, you're down to like 35-foot wide lot width. 40-foot lot width, I think is what they were, depending on the zone you're in. With those types of zones, I think we need to go with larger front yard pavage or paving percentage compared to if you've got a standalone single family dwelling on a 80-foot wide lot or 75 or 70-foot lot. You know, with the standalone single family dwelling on with a 70-foot wide lot or an 85, or excuse me, an 80-foot wide lot that we're seeing, I think you could go with 50%. But when you get involved with the zero lot lines, you're gonna have to go with a higher percentage to make it even work.
So what percentage would that be?
Well, calculations I were going with the 35-foot wide lot. If you went with 70%, I think we can get a 24.5 width driveway.
24.5.
Yeah, so if you take 35,
So the goal would be to allow 2 cars and maybe a boat, or 2 cars or 3 cars.
2 cars, just 2 cars. You go with 24-foot wide, I mean, that's as wide as your garage is typically. Or if it's, they might even be putting 22-foot wide garages in there, so they're gonna have a 22-foot wide drive. You know. So I think if you go ahead and you take 35 foot wide times 50%, you're down to 17.5 for a driveway width,
68% at 24 feet of 35 feet.
so 68%.
So
I mean,
70
or do you, why don't you take it down, you can have a 20 foot wide drive? I mean, that's something we need to take a look at. Or a 22 foot wide drive max.
On an R2 lot, like all the Dawson houses need to have 2 stalls, straight out to the street. You don't want to have people with the driveway skewing and then they're just backing over the grass and making a mess in the
They're
driveway.
back doing that, they're backing over the curb and doing
Yeah.
it, backing on the sidewalk, which isn't the required thickness there anyways.
Yeah,
Through this.
but I don't think we want it to be, if it's 70% on the minimum lot, that doesn't give them a lot of room to like add a whole nother stall. They're not gonna be able to put a third car in their driveway, and I don't think
You don't want that
necessarily want that.
anyways. I don't think the code allows that anyway. The code tells you can have a parking space in the required front yard as long as it leads to a parking space outside the front yard.
But maybe the
Technically, your garage.
workaround that we're trying to avoid here is a patio, like in the front yard, that looks like a parking spot, and it doesn't have any grass. We've got a requirement that says you have to have grass.
Yeah.
30% of your front yard has to be grass.
I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I see where you're going, but yeah. I mean, we just need to,
I don't know if we can do R3. It's gonna be pretty hard to,
We do people want to park the boat, they have living a 0 lot and want
we need to find some place to park it else. They need to, you want a boat parked right next to, on your driveway in front of your, the neighbor's driveway right in front of your house, so you can even look down the block. I mean, zoning is all about aesthetics. Okay. Technically, I don't think what I would call a boat as a special vehicle shouldn't be parked in your drive, in my opinion. only.
You're gonna get some argument there, right?
I know, I would,
No doubt.
but, but you said R3. What's that? Yeah,
People don't have other places to camp.
I agree with that, Roger, but I mean, that's, you buy the property, Yeah, I mean, you know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to be.
well, I didn't mean to point it.
I wish you guys could see Garner, because this was a big fight, like the whole time while I was there, whether to do it or not, and in terms of it being perpendicular with their house and it's not sticking out, that's probably okay. But when you're talking they're in the front drive doing it, then it becomes a site issue for kids, riding their bike or running down the sidewalk, or, when you're backing out, then it becomes a safety issue. And it's not so much of a necessarily camper or RV. What ends up happening is there are some people who don't necessarily maintain them and try and fix them, and they sit there all the time. Luckily, we don't have that issue here. I'm telling you, I have pictures on pictures.
Yes, I see it plenty with wrecked vehicles sticking out into the sidewalks. And there's disregard for pedestrian traffic when they park them in their driveway. And I mean, it's happening here. And I think it'd be encouraged.
Business idea.
Mhm.
Stay on the side.
Yeah, I guess we should walk.
So we can agree on R1. And 50% seems like an appropriate
Well,
percentage.
I think what you need to maybe take a look at is 0 lot lines and non-zero lot lines. Because if you can have a 0 lot line in an R1 or 2 and R3. And then the lot width is only 35 feet. Okay, so then that would have to be depending on what we want to go with, either a 65%, 70%, whatever, as a board we think. But if you add a regular non-zero lot line home on a 70 or 80-foot lot width, depending on what zone you're in, then you could have up to 50%.
And 50% to me seems like more than enough.
That seems like a lot, yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
You're doing 3 stalls, and I guess it's,
Exactly,
Right.
yeah. Stalls. And a lot of houses are being built with 3 stalls that they're non-zero lot lines.
I wish I had 50%.
Hypothetical situation by, like, I'm trying to think of an R3 scenario that already exists in town and what their usage is and if it's conforming or not to what we would be proposing, like, only one I'm finding is like over by the funeral home here on Peterson Street. We've got that 7-plex where it's just driveways all the way across the front.
Yeah,
But the whole thing is one lot, so are we saying that that needs to be 70%? That might be a challenge.
Is that a zero lot line? You see what I'm saying?
It's a 0 lot.
I think they are.
Are these zeros?
They're
Okay.
a joint, I mean, they're all stacked together like.
In Peterson, they're not. Some of them are, some of them are and aren't. So depending on where you're starting on Peterson. If you're talking across Lions, then yes, but if you're talking behind Lions, or if you're talking Lions Park, or if you're talking further south, then no.
Are they duplexes then?
well, are you talking about the places right from Main Street up to the.
They're 80-foot wide
That
lots.
too. I guess.
Yes.
Show you the ones I've
There's
got.
5 of them together.
Right by the bank, there's 5 that are, joined together and
The
they're.
newer group of 3
Oh, right behind the bank.
on the hill.
And it's basically all driveway.
Yeah.
There are 3 zoning. I'm not sure I'm not sure that they would be as easily fit into what we're talking about as an R2 requirement. And maybe it's case by case, like we just don't make a requirement and they have to have their site plans reviewed. So we can just review it at that, make.
I think Matt had a special. I mean, probably need to get you back on what his wording was last week, why he didn't like it.
What
seemed
did
like
like
there's-
what, Brad?
What's that?
Did like what?
I think he was worried about what we're talking about, which is putting
Yes.
somebody into a
Yeah,
non-conforming.
yes, right.
But maybe.
Well,
just
maybe we can do
only
this
R1
just
and
for new construction.
So these are not zero lots, they're condos.
Mm-hmm.
Then just up the street on the other side.
That's what he's saying.
This one over there. So.
Education.
Dealing with.
Those are.
Okay.
Those are multi-family.
Yeah. Right.
We're dealing with single.
What they're saying is just not always pursue.
I think these would be, this one would not be a challenge. like the Driveways are smashed together. So
I would say we're not dealing with.
this one. that would be properties.
That's in the same neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Is that
what
the
Ryan's trying to say, is he doesn't want.
You
it to
get to
get in
review
the-
the site plan, you might as well just say.
Mhm.
We'll review the
Okay.
site plan individually, your case by case, and we'll have a standard of 70% for R2 and 50% for R1.
Well, that's
It should be for single families and duplexes, you know.
Yeah, if they put a
Multi-family
single family on, they put a single family on an R2 lot, I don't think we want that in single family to have.
Yeah, you can't change it all.
Correct, correct.
just.
I'd say we
Because
could,
we don't
maybe we
want to
should table it.
stormwater.
Yes. Just because we go ahead and pass the parking thing, doesn't mean we have to send it to council right away, does it?
Well, yes, that's the idea.
Well, can't we sit on it, I mean, for another meeting? until we
Well,
come up with something on-
Let me suggest there's something else we might be able to do. And that is, that this is really a land use question, right? So we could, as we discussed the comprehensive plan land use section, we could see if this kind of a requirement might fit in as an objective to the land use plan.
So incorporate.
And if
that.
so, then that would guide us in our decisions on future development. It wouldn't be retroactive. It simply would say that this is an objective of our comprehensive plan. And then in following the comprehensive plan as a commission, and with future developments, we would seek to impose this on the development plan. Make sense?
So as far as what we're doing tonight, then we
So
basically
it's-
table. for
we're
tonight?
tabling this for tonight. We're taking that from the January, meeting. I mean, excuse me, March meeting. I know.
Just
I
table
know.
it.
March is the, it's already upon us. Okay, well,
March
that takes care of item D and E. And the next is sign requirements, which we have taken up before.
Yeah, I think we need to take this off the list. It's been on the list the last two times. We dealt with this already. The new sign requirements are in the ordinance. I'm thinking, like I said last time, I think this might have something to do with PUD. And I thought the last time we discussed it, Roger, you were here, that we were gonna leave that up to the committee
Discussions on the PUD.
on the PUD
Okay.
when someone comes in with a PUD. So I think that this needs to be taken off. Would you agree? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, we were gonna
okay.
review that site.
Said Roger, so I got confused.
Now, well, Roger was at the last meeting also when we discussed it. He was saying the same thing.
Okay, no problem. And building design standards.
So still working on language on what to do about floor plans, or about varying floor plans. As I reiterate again, being friends with your state legislators is a good idea because I don't know if it'll get through or not, but they're trying to take away a city's ability to do building design standards. So, I'm hearing that that's not gonna pass, but I'm also hesitant to put in a bunch of work if it's gonna be obsolete in 2 or 3 months.
Is that part of the 1,600-page reorganization plan that they're working on up there?
Probably a separate 1,000-page one.
They've got to,
Say cities can't do
So-
anything anymore.
we read that right now, while the legislature's in session, we almost don't have any real guidance about what we can do. I mean, it seems to me, is that an incorrect statement? What do you say, Des?
You know, Sally, they're talking about this, but I was at a Zoom meeting at the state last week. And there's a proposal to go ahead and get rid of the energy code too. Seriously,
Well,
and
I
it
mean-
might go through.
It might, it's past its
Yeah.
committee or
Yeah,
subcommittee.
subcommittee, it passed.
How could they do that?
They got
Voted
voted
on
in,
it.
they can vote on it. Didn't
Yeah.
get
And
What-
there's a
what's it
developer out of Davenport, and I don't remember the developer's name, but he's pushed a lot of stuff through before. He's pushing this through.
Well, on what ground? Like, why would they justify this?
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing?
Affordable
So it's
housing.
more affordable to have a $600 a month utility
So
bill?
the builders don't worry about that. They worry about what it's costing to build the thing. They don't care after it's sold. They don't care.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I mean,
And then,
it's
and then they're gonna
interesting.
take it out of the city's hands to enforce those sort of things and design
Exactly.
standards?
Exactly. That's
That's
what's going on right now with all this stuff.
I mean, really, basically, a lot of what's happening, from my reading of the paper, is that there's a tremendous move toward consolidation of a whole lot of power down to Des Moines.
Yeah.
And it's kind of boring reading at times until you suddenly realize that it affects you.
Mhm.
Then it becomes a lot more interesting.
I mean, these contractors can go ahead and say, yeah. Our house is insulated, we insulated, we put our 10 in the attic and we put our 5 in the wall. Compared to 49 and, and 21. So it's it's affordable housing is what they're really trying to base this stuff on. It's getting pretty interesting.
Okay, well, I think Adam's determination to wait and see what we're stuck with and when the legislature's over is a good idea. What about tree standards?
So I have a member volunteering from the tree commission to kind of take a look at our tree species, and then I'm gonna have them just kind of look at, you know, some of the things that Chad talked to the board about. Cooney, when he was here, in terms of, you know, how many trees or what type of trees, how big should the trees be? He had some decent recommendations. So I guess I'm leaving it for the tree committee to work it out first before it gets up to here.
Okay. I'm glad to see that we have a tree committee and they're active.
I do have a
this-
question about that. So is that going to be retroactive for residents? Well, that's just for new development? Or that's
Or
for
is it-
the new?
Oh, or is it trees all around town? Is that
Yeah.
basically?
new yards.
No, because we can't, no, you can't like. There's certain things that are grandfathered and not, and so if you're talking cutting down trees, you know. Or we're trying, making everybody put in one more tree, you know, we're not gonna go that.
Okay, I just want to make sure it wasn't.
However, this tree committee can, in accord with the comprehensive plan, suggest different tree species and the desirability of the tree canopy and so forth. So again, it's that communications point that Madison was bringing up.
And then how to develop replacement trees for trees that come, you know, how to fill in. I'm not sure, but you know, not have all the same species.
Right. Okay, well, I think that brings us then to city staff reports. Anything further that you'd like to share, Adam or Terry?
We've got this map, I would just kind of keep it, hold on to it. I'll try and find a way to. Maybe, I don't know. I didn't realize how great the coloring would come out on these, but it was my hope that you guys could scribble and scratch on this. I don't know how easy that's going to be, so I'll probably send you all an email and try and find a way to have you guys map it out, but I would like to see something from you guys so I can get by next meeting, just so I can get a picture of how you see things, and I'll try and use that feedback to try and come up with a couple drafts. Because it shouldn't be just me doing it. You guys have a say in this community too. And yeah, I just make sure you got the objectives too, because that matters too. Let me kind of figure out something to help you with the map. I'll send it to you, and then if I gotta print stuff off, then I'll print it off and have it ready for you guys to pick up.
So I have a question. So as far as, like, is there something on this map that currently isn't on this map that we need to account for, like PUD? Do we need to designate that on here that it currently?
That would be residential.
That would be residential. Oh, okay, that would be considered R1 or.
I
No,
think,
no,
You're not getting that into the nuts of it.
I think
well,
the,
it is residential on this map, but that doesn't mean that that's what we want to see it as.
right, we have
PUDs
two PUDs
broader
with
than residential.
commercial uses
Yeah,
intended in.
Much broader than residential.
I want it vague to see what your vision is, so there's no right or wrong answer. Some of you are gonna be specific. And some of you are gonna be vague, and I wanna see the differences, and if you guys are seeing the same things as me. So me, I'm just detailed oriented. If I were to do it, there would be more zones. There would probably be low and moderate and high density residential, or yes, or RB1. You'd have residential and business kind of together, but I just want to see what your vision.
Kind of like on the south side here, I mean, you get clear over to the Cedar Johnson line on the south side of the interstate. There's could be someday there too that they'll want to come to town and not.
And it seems like a lot of commercial for me on the south side.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
obviously close to the exit needs to stay that way, but Yeah, close to the Cedar Johnson. I don't know. That's a lot of commercial.
Especially for a town that don't have any much at all.
And even in a town of 5,000, it's probably gonna be, you know. I don't know. You know, we'll see. We always have some hot leads that never go anywhere. So that's. So I just want your guys' thoughts, and certainly the annex land that isn't in this map needs to be in it. So by Bickford. That would be my one requirement, is include something around Bickford.
So that they're proposing to annex the whole property.
Yes, so it's it's already yellow, but the one behind it's yellow, but the two to the west. So let me print stuff off. I'll find something that'll work better than this. There's no wrong or right answer. It just shouldn't be one person making recommendations, so. That's kind of why I want your guys' feedback.
Sounds good. Roger, you have anything to add? Any changes with the prospect of a hotel in town?
Yeah, that's, we don't know anything more.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think that any additional comments from?
John, I have one question. Can you hear me?
Go ahead.
I was just wanting to know if they could comment on how many suitors that Norm had for the annex property?
Suitors, how many?
Prospective developers.
Correct.
I don't know yet. That's gonna matter. Some of that's gonna matter with how much the infrastructure is gonna cost. But if you're talking. That's a good guess. My guess is probably. You know, I'm not even gonna speculate at this point, but
That's
I'll
fine.
show you. It's better to see it on paper.
That's fine. That's fair.
So.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, I'll make a motion to adjourn. Yeah, it's been seconded. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, we're adjourned.
Okay.